bringing you 5 secret wide receivers that you should be drafting in fantasy football and be buying low right now because their value is so incredible. But before we get started, I am on the way to 3,000 subscribers, so I would greatly appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button as I'm helping you win your fantasy football championship in 2024. Starting off with player number 1, it's going to be my man Rashee Rice from the Kansas City Chiefs. And listen, I swear, if you watched any of my content over the last month, y'all know I love some Rashee Rice. I talk about him at least once every other week. It's crazy that I have a man crush on a guy that can't seem to drive a car. But besides his lack of driving control, he's an absolute demon on the fantasy football field. Where last year, he was the clear wide receiver 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs, which honestly is not super impressive because of the lack of options that they had on the offense. But considering the fact that his snap share was super low under Andy Reid, I mean, if we're looking at the first 8 weeks of the season, Rashee Rice was in the absolute rookie doghouse from a guy like Andy Reid. When we're looking at him with the 30% snap share, 15, 52, 47, 30, 51, 60% snap share, where really until like week 13, he wasn't getting up into that 70% snap share numbers that you want to see for a guy that isn't the best wide receiver on a team. But even doubting that, he still put up wide receiver 28 points per game numbers. So he was super efficient when he was out there on the field. He just wasn't out on the field enough. And so all of a sudden we look him into year 2 and we're not expecting any type of suspension at this point. Of course, that could still come. There is that little bit of risk, and that's still why his value hasn't gone absolutely soaring up. But Rashee Rice, when we're looking at him, 11.9 yards per reception. I know they brought in Hollywood Brown. I know they brought in Xavier Worthy. I'm not worried about them taking away from Rashee Rice because they're going to be down the field. It's not going to be the close intermediate routes that they're taking away. And so I absolutely love Rashee Rice still, as he was the wide receiver 33 in targets, wide receiver 45 on target share, wide receiver 12 on target rate, which means that when he was open, they were targeting him. And I absolutely love Rashee Rice heading into 2024 fantasy football. So let me know what you think of him. Right now on the composite ADP, you can get Rashee Rice as wide receiver 37. And last year he finished as wide receiver 32 on a points per game basis. You're already returning value to me at his current draft point, and I think it's just going to go higher. He is a secret wide receiver that is absolutely has league winning upside in 2024. My second wide receiver that has secret, but I don't think it's going to be a secret much longer, winning upside, is going to be Curtis Samuel. And Curtis Samuel right now on this Buffalo Bills offense, there's a lot of things to be excited for, especially when you're talking about guys like Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. But it seems like those two have gotten all the hype and Curtis Samuel really hasn't, even though Curtis Samuel's really the only one out of all 3 that has produced any type of fantasy football point results. Now, I hear you. It hasn't been great results for Curtis Samuel, but we do have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he was playing in a Washington Commanders offense that didn't have great quarterback play, but still had elite level weapons next to him, like a guy like a scary Terry McLaurin, even like them drafting a first round wide receiver like Jahan Dotson. And last year, wide receiver 48 on a points per game basis. The year before that, wide receiver 44. So you're going to say to me, Caleb, why are you so invested into a wide receiver that has only finished as wide receiver 44, wide receiver 46, and when we're looking at him, he's going off the board as wide receiver 51. Not only is that, like, let's say best case scenario finishes as wide receiver 40, you're still going to get a great value, but that's not league winning upside. The league winning upside is assuming the fact that Curtis Samuel is going to be the wide receiver 1 on a Josh Allen led Buffalo Bills team. Best quarterback that Curtis Samuel has played with up to this point in his career, which makes me super excited about the ultimate level upside that Curtis Samuel is going to have. Like I said, you're drafting him at wide receiver 51. You were drafting him overall pick 124. So what? That's 11th, 12th round value for potentially the wide receiver 1 on the Buffalo Bills. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we like to call a secret buy low, high upside type wide receiver. Absolutely love some Curtis Samuel as a secret wide receiver with league winning upside. My third wide receiver with secret league winning upside is going to be Diontae Johnson for the Carolina Panthers. Now, I'm recording this. Currently, the Patriots and Panthers preseason game is happening right now. Diontae Johnson isn't out there, but Diontae Johnson, as talked by with Dave Canales, is going to be the one to lead this team and be the guy to lead the overall receiving. Wherever Diontae Johnson is going, that is where our offense goes. So when we look at Diontae Johnson, the part that a lot of people are going to say is, hey, he has butterfingers. Last year really wasn't great for Diontae Johnson. When we're looking at Diontae Johnson's overall points per game at 11.8 points per game, wide receiver 39, played in 13 games, 87 targets, 51 receptions. Now, last year was playing with Kenny Pickett, so he is going to Bryce Young, which we'll have to see what type of upgrade that is. I mean, it's an upgrade. How big of an upgrade? Still don't know. But let us not forget that he has put up major fantasy points with Noodled Big Ben, which I would argue Noodled Big Ben and Bryce Young have probably the same type of upside and throwing power. Finished as wide receiver 8 back in 2021 and had 116 targets. The year before that had 144 targets. The year after that had 147 targets. Last year was kind of the lowest targets that he's had in his whole career, and that could be based on the offense. That could be because he was kind of in the doghouse. But if Diontae Johnson had commanded targets for 3 straight years in the 140s, even got up to a high of like 169, if for some reason Diontae Johnson just gets back to having 140 targets this year, I don't care how good this offense is, he is returning value when you currently have to draft him over on the composite ADP, wide receiver 38, overall player 82. Diontae Johnson is going ahead of guys like DeAndre Hopkins, who are in an offense where he's having to compete with Calvin Ridley, Will Levis. He's got 1 spot behind Rashee Rice. Diontae Johnson has ultimate level upside. A lot of people hate Diontae Johnson because he's kind of been known as overvalued next to George Pickens, but let's not take that and our hate into consideration with the fact that he is a man that demands targets. Absolutely a league-winning, high upside secret wide receiver that a lot of your league mates are not in on. We're talking about my 4th secret wide receiver with league-winning upside, and it's going to be Adoni Mitchell. And to be completely honest, I have not been the biggest Adoni Mitchell fan because I've been a big Josh Downs guy. But all of a sudden, with this Josh Downs injury, it opens up the door for that wide receiver 2 spot for Adoni Mitchell. When we look at Adoni Mitchell coming out of the University of Texas, and even when he played at Georgia, dude was an absolute baller deep down the field, ran a super high 40-yard dash time, so he's got the speed. Put him into an offense with Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman next to him. The world is Adoni Mitchell's oyster, and you're not having to draft him high at all. Right now, if we're looking at the ranks going off as the board as wide receiver 64, over a player 153. Now, listen, Josh Downs definitely had his moments last year, but it's hard to say what the wide receiver 2 in an Anthony Richardson's offense is going to do because we haven't seen it. But I do want to take a bet on a guy like Adoni Mitchell because the value is there in the draft. My 5th secret wide receiver with league-winning upside is going to be my guy, Pop Douglas, for the New England Patriots. Like we said, we're watching this New England Patriots game right now during the preseason. We got Drake May, Jacoby Brissett. Who's going to win the starting job? I think it's going to be Jacoby Brissett going forward. Who's going to be the starting wide receivers? How are those starting splits going to end up? Because there are a bunch of talented guys. Jaron Baker's been getting a ton of hype in camp. Jalen Polk, 3rd round wide receiver. And then we add a guy like Pop Douglas, who last year we were super excited about, a 5th round pick out of Liberty, showed flashes of explosion out of the slot. And so all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, Pop Douglas, year 2 breakout, is that potentially possible? Because we were talking about him as a stash, and he definitely showed signs of life when he had the ball in his hands after the catchability. Sign me the heck up with a guy like Pop Douglas, because I think, honestly, Pop Douglas could be the best performer out of this New England Patriots wide receiver core. Now, it's probably not going to be pretty. The fact of the matter is, if somehow Brandon Ayuk gets traded, like I said, I'm recording this on Thursday night, so if Brandon Ayuk gets traded to the New England Patriots, this take is probably dust. But I do like Pop Douglas in the sense that if a no Brandon Ayuk type level wide receiver gets added, absolutely love Pop Douglas and that explosion at his current cost, because right now you draft Pop Douglas at player 165 over a player wide receiver 69. And honestly, Jalen Polk's a spot ahead. So I do love both of those guys, but I think both those guys have high-end league-winning upside. Got to take advantage of it when you see those kind of values later in your draft. And I said 5 secret wide receivers, but I'm going to bring you a 6th one here as a bonus. 6th one is going to be my guy, Darnell Mooney, who Darnell Mooney, for all intents and purposes, has been super disrespected, wide receiver 67 over player 162. When we're talking about the great additions of this Atlanta Falcons team, we not only talk about Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix because we love our Bijan Robinson, Drake London shares, and Kyle Pitts, but Darnell Mooney is going to slide in as that wide receiver 2 in this offense. Let us not forget that Darnell Mooney has been a fantasy football producer before. It's not like he hasn't. He definitely, back in 2021, finished as a wide receiver 27 on a points per game basis. Now, the last 2 years, it's been absolutely abysmal in this Chicago Bears offense. 8.5 fantasy points per game, 5.3 fantasy points per game. So I don't commend you if you're a little bit worried about, hey, how is this going to look for Darnell Mooney in this offense, especially when he has to compete with targets with Drake London, Bijan, and Kyle Pitts. The thing I will say to you is they gave him a contract, which is always good to see, and there's really no other pieces that I'm worried about on this wide receiver core behind Darnell Mooney, so he clearly slides in as a wide receiver 2. We've seen wide receiver 2s for Kirk Cousins produce fantasy football points. Last year, before Justin Jefferson got hurt, Jordan Addison was still producing fantasy football points. The year before that, KJ Osborne was producing fantasy football points in the bunches. I'm not saying that he is going to all of a sudden become Darnell Mooney is going to be a wide receiver 1. No, I'm not going that far. What I will say is he's going to give you high-end wide receiver 3, potentially low-end wide receiver 2 numbers on a points per game basis if he can get back to that overall wide receiver 27 points per game mark, which I think he potentially could get to like that wide receiver 30 mark, and you're not having to take him at those current values at all in the overall adjusted ADP range when you're able to get Darnell Mooney at overall player 162, wide receiver 60 167. So if you like fantasy football content, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Like I said, we're on the way to 3,000 subscribers. I'm putting out a video a day at this point. We will be doing a lot more streams. We'll do some subscriber streams as well. So I want to make sure that you guys are here in the community as we're helping you win your fantasy football league in 2024. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.